Big time fight coming up this weekend in a little bit of what seems like a short notice affair. We have Andre Petroski taking on Micheal Gillmore. Matt, it's spelled Micheal. Is it Micheal? Is it Michelle? Is it Michael? Is it Mick? Is it Mike? I don't know, but I will tell you that that's how to properly spell it. And I'm just going off of his Instagram page, off his Facebook page that's out there. And props to Micheal Gillmore. I mean, this is a guy that's representing Murcielago MMA out of Michigan. He's a guy that ended up being a short notice call up to the Ultimate Fighter. He was actually an alternate. And I wrote it down in my notes, Matt. This is a guy that went to high school in Arizona with Dominic Cruz, got back into MMA because Dominic Cruz was in a WEC show. So that's what brought him back into it. WKC karate champion in 2019 at welterweight. They spelled his name as Michael. It's EAL. He probably gets sick and tired of that one. I'm not making fun of it, but he's a teammate of Joaquin Buckley. I've seen Daquan Townsend, I was going to say Daquan Townsend in his corner. I've seen Micheal Gillmore in Daquan Townsend's corner. Gilmore's actually been in a lot of different UFC guys' corners in the past, which I think is always neat to see. I talk about that with guys like Michael Chiesa, like Michael Johnson, so on and so forth. But for Gillmore, he had that Daniel Cormier opportunity as an Ultimate Fighter alternate where they brought him in. He ends up losing in the first round against Gilbert Urbina in the first bit of the bracket in this middleweight season. But I mean, this is a guy that quit his job to be there, like at 34 years old, and took on that's crazy to see. He went 8-2 as an amateur with a win over Chaos Williams, who he now trains with. And I mean, 6-3 as a pro. 5 of his losses, pro and amateur, by finish. 4 of them by submission. 1 by TKO or KO. I just want to ask you this before we get into Andre Petroski, who's definitely going to steal a lot of the thunder this week. But what did you see out of Micheal Gillmore that you liked coming into this week?
You bring up his karate. He does move well on the feet. He is a really dynamic guy because he can strike forwards and backwards. Oh,
and he's got good wrestling too. He's got good wrestling that goes with it as well.
I would say, if we're going to 2K badge this, he's kind of like the silver version of Kyler Phillips. Now, I understand Kyler Phillips to be in the Gold or Hall of Fame, but it is kind of that unique combination. I don't look at Micheal Gillmore as a karate wrestler like GSP, for instance. I look at him more as the karate and then the wrestling, because it will be really interesting with Gillmore. He's a guy who likes to pressure his opponents quite a bit, but when he's the one moving backwards, he can kind of be the sniper with some of his shots. Again, I don't want to bring up Conor McGregor's knockout of Jose Aldo, but again, it's something he can kind of do moving backwards. He's someone who can counter with straight shots coming down the middle, and that'll be really interesting against a guy like Petroski, because Petroski is by far the more powerful striker in this fight, and that's what this fight's really going to come down to. I know a lot of people are probably down on Petroski because of his last fight against. You're breaking up bad.
It's not my internet, but if you look at it for Petroski, this is squarely going to depend on his wrestling in this one. I mean, this is a guy that it's karate versus collegiate wrestling. The other crazy thing is the fact that how crazy is it that this was one of Team Ortega's guys? This was his second pick in Andre Petroski versus, again, a guy that came in as an alternate to replace Miles Hunsinger. If you look at it for Petroski, this is a guy 7-1 as an amateur between 2016 and 2018. Between 2018 and now 5-1, 3 wins by knockout, 2 by submission. Coming out of Renzo Gracie's in Philly. Yeah, Pat Sabatini also in this card from that gym. But Matt, Sabatini, Sean Brady, who was getting ready to fight Kevin Lee this weekend, Jonathan Webb, Jeremiah Wells, so many great fighters. He was a guy that finished, 5th, 3rd, and 2nd at state in high school. So you like to see that out of his wrestling. Pennsylvania, obviously known for the wrestling in high school. He went to University of North Carolina. Then he went to Bloomsburg in Pennsylvania. Then I hope I just don't mispronounce this one, but I think it's Kutztown. Is that it? Kutz town. In D2 after that. But if you look at it, I mean, there was a great breakdown skill-wise by Ed Gallo. Everybody by now should know him. He did this piece over with Bloody Elbow. He's definitely a great follow on Twitter. You can follow him all over the place. But he mentioned that Petroski does a really good job with his feints, and then he'll also use an overhand to kind of work to drop levels and then take a single leg, take a knee pick, an ankle pick, maybe not an ankle pick, but a knee pick or the single leg. He does a lot of things really well there. Then the other thing that I kind of saw in my tape study for this one, He does a really good job to strike the clinch. We see a lot of wrestlers that do that. Some guys don't have success. They get caught by straight shots. He did that against Aaron Jeffrey. He beat him in the first round. And listen, I'm Canadian, so what am I going to say about Aaron Jeffrey? Aaron Jeffrey's our guy, but Jeffrey just kind of outlasted him. I mean, he did a good job. He got out wrestled and reversed in the second round of that one, hammered out on top. He gets back up, and then eventually he ends up getting finished. But overall, Brian Ortega wanted to see more movement out of Andre Petroski when he was standing. And I think that's one of those ones where it's the same thing when he lost to Brian Battle in the Ultimate Fighter. He's like wrestling, and then he gets caught in a defensive submission. What was it? A head and arm choke? And he gets finished again. So it's one of those ones. If he had a little bit more flash and flair, then he might win more.
Exactly. Like Petroski's worst nightmare is a guy like Gerald Meerschaert, because if he did move quite a bit more on the feet, then you would like him. This is the thing about Gillmore. We've kind of seen him lose to opponents like this in the past. Like, I do think the pressure of Petroski's going to eventually get to Gillmore. And it will be interesting, though. Can he catch him on the way in? It's going to be interesting. I don't think he can personally. And again, I think the fact that he doesn't have the defensive submissions game will allow Petroski to continue to go for those takedowns, because you said it. It is the strike into the takedown factor. And if Gillmore is constantly opening himself up, going for the counter, when Petroski's putting his head down, it might even open himself up to getting clipped by one of those big shots. And again, if he gets clipped by a big shot and then Petroski gets on top, I could more likely see him winning via ground and pound finish. I wouldn't be surprised at all by that. It's just, this is one of those fights where this is a very Tuesday night contenders fight for the UFC to be putting on, because Petroski is such a heavy favorite.
I was listening, and I'll give shouts where it's due, to the MMA Odds Breaker show before we came on with Adam Martin and Marcel Dorff. Everybody knows those two guys, and I would say both friends of the show. But Marcel kind of alluded to the fact that it seemed like, and again, we're just speculating. This is all alleged, whatever adage I can add here. But it seemed like Petroski was going to take on Gilbert Urbina in the finals. And then ultimately you have Tresean Gore falls out. Urbina gets the fight in the finale. So they bring back Gillmore, who, again, he was an alternate. It was a super short notice call-up that he ended up getting to make it into the season. So now he gets an opportunity. To me, you say contender series, it feels more like a Bellator-type prelim move to have a fight like this, because it's definitely going to be like a one and done for either guy. I think if Petroski loses, all he has to do, go back to the regional scene, rattle off a few more wins, you're on contender series. For a guy like Gillmore, he wins, they might, this would sound silly because this is a true UFC fight, but I bet you if he wins, he might get like a developmental deal or a Dana White's contender series. It sounds silly because he's 34 already, but it's just an odd spot for both guys. The line on this one, Petroski open to -175. He's a -511 on best fight odds. Gillmore open to +145. He's +372. I think it really comes down to, can Petroski get him down and finish him in the first or second round, or does Gillmore outlast him? Because, I mean, Petroski's a guy that used to wrestle. He started wrestling at 174 pounds. Gillmore will be the smaller guy in the cage. I mean, you look at the picture that I put up, it's Petroski holding a dumbbell that's giant and Gillmore just doing a regular fight pose. But I look at this one, Matt, Tapology votes, not even close. 835 total votes, 94% Petroski, 65% by submission. For the 6% that have Gillmore, 47% by decision, 31% by knockout. I mean, it's tough for me to go with Gillmore here. Like, you took a fight on short notice. Great that he gets the opportunity in this one. He either lands a lucky shot or he outlasts him, but Petroski is one of those guys. Like, this feels like a big setup fight for him to get into the UFC. It feels like we've had guys that made it to the UFC, even though they didn't win or they didn't do that great on the Ultimate Fighter. Like, here you go, here's your shot. So to me, it feels like one of those.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Again, it's a great story for Gillmore, but this is a really, really tough stylistic matchup for him. And again, you kind of mentioned the final nail in the coffin. He will be the smaller guy in this fight. If Petroski is able to get a hold of him and really start to grapple him early and often, it's not going to help Gillmore's gas tank being the smaller guy underneath, trying to get back up constantly. I like Petroski quite a bit in this one.
You know, to me, it kind of feels like, who do we have that fight? It was, Greece's Andreas Michailidis when he went to take on Modestas Bukauskas. It was like Yeah, but he's a smaller guy, and the other guy hits hard, and it was a weird one. So yeah, both of us, Matt, going with Petroski to get the win in this one. I know he's a big favorite, but yeah, I mean, really feels like his opportunity to shine. Matt, our next fight on the card, Kevin Lee, the return of the future champ, taking on Daniel Rodriguez. We get a great card ahead. Turcios taking on Highstand. You've got Battle taking on a really, really tough out in Urbina. And then in the main event, Barboza taking on Chikadze. You're not going to want to miss that. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say,
let's get into it.